Delight Your Marriage, episode 26.
Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast, the show where you hear from amazing and inspiring wives sharing their struggles, triumphs, and advice for this journey called marriage. Here's your host, Belah Rose.
Hey there, welcome back. This is Belah Rose, and I just want to thank you for joining me. If this is your first time, it's Delight Your Marriage podcast, where we interview wives and intimacy experts. And I also have a very special message to share with anyone who has listened to DYM for a while or is interested in hearing more of the vision behind it. I actually felt like God wanted me to record it, and so I spent some time the other day making the audio, and I actually didn't listen to it afterwards because I got too scared, and so it's just raw. I didn't edit it or anything, and I uploaded it. It's on delightyourmarriage.com/vision, and it's just really my heart. It's where I come from. It's a little bit of my credentials, and also where I think I'm hoping to kind of guide this whole project and business and pursuit. I'm hoping that God is going to use it in a really powerful way. And I'd love to let you in on what I think God is saying. So that is delightyourmarriage.com/vision. Now, if you didn't get a chance to listen to the first half of this really great episode with Lael, she actually does the first part in episode 25. And so I'd love for you to listen to that. Also, today, she's going to go deeper into this whole topic on sex toys and intimacy, and she even gives some great tips, just practical tips. And the more you hear about her family and her life, you're just going to fall in love with just the way she does and works in it. And I'm excited for you to hear the second half. I think it's going to be great. Let's dive in. Now, I want to ask you how, now you talked about some things that, shifted in your mind and in your marriage. I mean, can you tell us just how your marriage is now and how, you kind of look back from the before and after so someone can have an idea of this might be where they're starting from, but they can get to a really great place?
Well, as much as I had some hangups from the way I was raised, one thing I was blessed with was that marriage is forever, and you find that partner that's God's choice for the rest of your life. You stick together and you make that man number one after God, before your children, before anything else, and you make that a priority. And that part has been a blessing. I feel like my husband and I have really been blessed with both knowing that our marriage is the top priority in our life, above, right below God. And that has pretty much, we've had to learn different lessons as the years have gone by, and we've gone to counseling probably 3 times. I've seen so many of my friends' marriages end in divorce and everything, that was one thing I decided, because I would always, why don't you guys get counseling? Why don't you do this? And nobody would do anything, and it would fall apart. It was so frustrating. So my husband and I committed, if one of us ever feels frustrated, we're not waiting till our marriage is at a bad place. We're just going to go and talk to somebody and work out the small issues, and not be ashamed of it or anything. So probably in the first 5 years of marriage, we went to, like I said, counseling about 3 different times. And it was awesome. It was basically just us talking out loud, to each other somewhere, and the person listening, and then you just realize as you're working it out what the issues are. So just being willing to admit when you need help figuring something out or you have questions. And I feel blessed to be married truly to my best friend. I feel like my husband and I just have a really fantastic relationship, and I think the main reason is because of keeping that relationship more important than jobs, kids, sports, anything else.
I love that. That's brilliant. And it's good that you say the priority before kids, sports, activities, anything else. That's very important because I think sometimes women especially, they think that their kids need to come first. Why is it that you say the opposite?
I believe that that's the best gift that you can give your children. In fact, I have a funny note. When you adopt kids and they're at older ages, when they come into your family, there can be some pretty rough transition periods for a while. And I have a note that one of my children wrote to the other ones, and it said, "Dear such and such, I hate you. P.S. Mom and Dad love each other so much." And signed off. I'm like, it had nothing to do with the argument or anything, you know. And but you know, that's just they just know that we're crazy about each other. And I don't think, I mean, they see their friends. In fact, my daughter was telling me the other day that she only has one friend that's from a 2-parent intact marriage. And that's a tragedy, you know. And I think that that's the best gift, knowing that we're happy with each other, that we're content, our family's going to be strong and together. You can't give your kids a better gift. And I think it's a fallacy to put your husband or wife lower down the priority because you're too busy at work, or you have too much with the kids, or you have to anything else, because if that falls apart, then you've really shaken their foundation.
That's brilliant. That's just so good, Lael. I literally just got goosebumps. Thank you. I just so agree. So there's a couple points I want to bring out. I mean, it's interesting. The best gift you can give your kids is to love your husband or your wife.
Yes.
And I think that's so good because even literally last night I was, frustrated. I've got two babies under 2 actually.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy sometimes. But it's such a blessing as well. You obviously know the situation of little kids at the, close in age, but so I was impatient with them last night, and my husband came home from work. He works nights, and I just, was tearing up telling him about how I was impatient and how I didn't give these frustrations to God. I was just not kind of in the zone. And he was kind to me. He was very generous and, said I'm a good mother and just kind of assured me, but he also, challenged me of like, we've been through this. And you really want to be attentive to your kids, and how can I help you kind of think through this, or how can I support you? And literally I can be a better mother because I have a good relationship with my husband. I mean, golly, it's just, you don't have to be in your marriage you don't have to be a parent by yourself. You're coupled with someone in God's design on purpose. So you can be vulnerable and be like, shoot, I messed up with the kids. How can I fix this? And I'm new to motherhood. So you definitely know that dynamic.
Well, and another thing I've had so many people say is like, and this is from the wise point of view, but like, he won't go to counseling, or he. And the thing is you both fell in love with each other. You both saw something that you loved about each other. And if you're at a bad place, you're probably both miserable. It's not just usually one person, and so don't use that as an excuse. Do whatever you have to do, even if you go to counseling by yourself or you read books. And it does take 2 people to fix something, but you can fix your half, and you can be the you can look out for those sarcastic attitudes, or always looking at the negative, or putting the worst spin on things, and you can make sure that what you are responsible for is glorifying to God, and that you're somebody who's wonderful to come home to. Whether your husband, hopefully he will go and will participate, but you can produce the atmosphere that's very conducive to change.
Yes. And I think especially those, wives that their husbands are not Christian. My pastor said something brilliant. He said, being a Christian should be the best thing that ever happened to your husband.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because we have the Holy Spirit inside of us, the power to forgive an offense, to the power to be proactive in our kindness, to go and take the first step, to turn the other cheek. I mean, he should feel so much more loved, since that we have Jesus's love within us. What were you going to say?
Yes. Well, and just to balance that out, I don't want to sound like I think that the wife has to be the one that's all makes all the sacrifices. That was speaking of things I have to change for my upbringing. I was definitely raised very strong with, submission, and your husband is, you treat him like the Lord of your life and all that. And that was something my husband didn't want a wife, anything like that. He wanted somebody who would speak her mind, who would be honest, who would stand up for herself. And, either extreme can lead to an unhappy marriage, and so if you're being mistreated, very lovingly and gently stand up for yourself. Don't tolerate that, because you're a helpmate, you're not a doormat. And so you can just, I believe that for somebody to respect you, you have to be a person that respects yourself as well, and so, just make sure that it's balanced.
Yes. And I'm just so glad that you brought that up, because I think that is very true. And that's probably, in terms of which extreme, you kind of really need to evaluate your own marriage and decide, are we on equal footing here? Am I being respected in the marriage? Because those relationships, those dynamics definitely need to be identified. And it's interesting when you were talking about how you make sure that your products are not linked to people that support pornography and that kind of thing. Are you familiar with No More? Have you heard of that yet?
I can't say that I am, no.
No, that's totally fine. It's a new thing, but it's actually interesting. Yesterday was International Women's Day, and that's kind of an event to really encourage the ending of sexual abuse.
Oh, and is that sexual trafficking as well?
Yes, exactly. Yep. And so No More is a recent campaign. My friend's involved with it. That's why I'm very familiar with it. But it's a recent campaign to help end sexual abuse in relationships, because it's just such a common thing. And yesterday, my church actually did a little meeting to kind of talk about this No More campaign, and just to talk about how abuse might be happening in relationships that you might know about, and how you can kind of encourage victims to maybe stand up for themselves, and or the abusers to stop that behavior. And it's interesting, there's a couple lists. I'll link to it in the show notes, because there was some lists of abuse. So there was like economic abuse, emotional abuse, and then physical abuse. And a lot of times abuse, we think it's just physical. And we think physical abuse often is just when they lay hands on you. But even, throwing things, or, banging on walls, slamming doors, that's all physical abuse. Also emotional abuse, things like withholding affection is abuse, and isolation from friends and family is abuse. And it's interesting, it wasn't until yesterday, literally, that I read that list that I talk about in another podcast, but I was married previously, and I literally experienced 9 out of 10 of those abuses, and I never named it as abuse. I would never have called it abuse. And I really encourage anyone who's listening to just go right ahead and just learn a little bit more about abuse, because I know it's hard to call maybe your husband or wife an abuser, and I understand that that's a very dynamic term. But the nice thing about having a dynamic term like that and recognizing something as abuse is that you take it seriously, and you start to realize changes need to be made.
Yes.
So I love that you mentioned that, Lael, because you're right. There's very frequently in marriages, if abuse is going on, the woman thinks that she needs to submit, or she needs to, go learn. And, I have a book called Delight Your Husband, and I would never want someone to read that book and think, they need to do, 150% when their husband is kind of forcing, you shouldn't be forced in that kind of a way. It really should come out of the outpouring of your heart to serve, and to serve like Jesus did.
A really excellent book on that is Boundaries in Marriage.
Yes.
And it gives just a really nice, because it's not even always just abuse. It's even just ways that we prevent having resentment in our heart, because we're acting the same way we would have boundaries for our children. It can keep us from having resentful attitudes or bad attitudes, because we've acted in a way that maintains our own self-respect and boundaries.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I love the Boundary series, brilliant books, and you're so right. And if you have been subject to abuse in the past, for example, I kind of grew up in some negative patterns. It's very easy for you to have that same pattern in your marriage without even realizing it. You think it's normal. And so, or bad boundaries, like you said, it might just be bad boundaries. And if you have, had these negative kind of, you feel like, someone's kind of stepping on your toes, but you don't know why. And there's just this level of discomfort. Those kinds of books are going to really give you a lot of insight into how to, okay, this is what's mine. This is what's yours. I can say no and feel okay with saying no, which is a huge point. Yeah, probably a whole nother episode on that. So I thank you for bringing that up. But I wanted to also put to your point about counseling. You mentioned that you all did that a couple of times. And I think that's brilliant, because I think a lot of times we think, okay, well, that costs money. And so I don't want to, that we just don't have that in the budget. That's just not something we can afford right now. How were you able to prioritize that, and even in your budget?
I think, again, comes back to that your marriage is the number one priority. So if you have to cancel a session of your kids' sports, or you have to cancel the gym membership, or you do what it takes to keep the relationship healthy. And nobody's saying you have to go to counseling for 5 years or something. I think each time we went 2 or 3 times. And it was just, here's an issue we keep crashing our heads up against, so how can we fix this so that we can not do that in the future, and then moving on. It wasn't, it doesn't have to be like, my marriage is on the rocks, it's the end, it's my last ditch thing. It's going to be a lot harder for counseling. You should still do it, but a lot harder work then. Better to go when you just keep, don't go to your girl. Girlfriends are awesome. I have a really close group of friends, but, going and bad mouthing your spouse and everything is not going to be helpful. It's better to get some positive action advice.
Yes, and I love that. And if a listener doesn't know quite where to go with that, I'm going to have some resources linked up on the show notes. But one in particular is a past guest, JD, from episode 2 and 3, and he's a marital intimacy coach. So, there's at least one resource that you can kind of reach out to learn more. But I just so agree that that's something that should be absolutely prioritized, because, like you said, a good marriage exponentially increases your effectiveness in every area. It's better for your job. It's better for your kids. It's better for your extended family. It's better for your church. It's better for your community. I just love that point. So I want to kind of move to ask you about the 3 things that you think have been central to your marital success so far, if you can kind of dumb them down.
Well, I was asking my husband about that this morning. I'm like, what 3 things do you think? And yes. One was jumping on problems when they're small, getting help, not letting them fester. Growing in intimacy was another. And then one thing that's been big for us is knowing each other's limits and not trying to push more. Just knowing your spouse is what they can handle. Like, we moved many years ago, and I had a list for my husband to do. We needed to get the house ship shape, and I just put so much pressure on him, and it was a horrible time in our marriage. We were just fighting constantly and everything. And so we recently moved about 4 months ago, and it was a completely different experience, because this time I was able to remember how it had been the last time, and to know what his, it's better to pay somebody to do those things, or it's better to, on a weekend I could, hope for this much to get done, but he has a full-time job, and, and he does the same for me when I feel like I'm just going to scream because I'm so frustrated with the children or something like that. Yeah. He doesn't, instead of jumping on me about it, he's like, here's your book, go take a bath. I've got you covered, or whatever. So just really watching for each other's, not pushing each other's buttons, and knowing their limits, and not trying to force them to go past that.
Yes. Oh, I just love that insight. So it was jumping on problems when they're small. Number 2, growing in intimacy. And number 3, knowing each other's limits. That's just, brilliant. I love that. And I know we've talked about intimacy quite a lot already, but if you're comfortable, would you share a tip that, someone as a wife could even implement tonight, for example? Would you go ahead with that?
Sure. Start by sending your husband a text, telling him that you're, you're looking for something mildly erotic, that he knows what you're talking about, and that you're looking forward to that tonight or something. And then just, forget about your hang-ups and throw on something cute and sexy and come on to him. and be the initiator, and just have fun. Just do something that you're always too embarrassed or too shy or too worried about, and just go for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Yeah. Do something fun, spice it up. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And it's funny when you do those extra over and beyond intimacy gestures, where you just make it just a feast for him. The next time is just so much more fun and enjoyable, even if it's maybe the status quo the next time. It's just a new zing. It's a new zest that you want to just infuse your marriage with all the time. Why not?
Right.
Why not have a great love life? I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Yeah, brilliant. So then, due to the specific marriage that you've had, what opportunities have you had to serve God or get to know God better?
I would believe the serving God part would be, I really consider my business to be a ministry. And so I believe that the hurdles that we've overcome have allowed us to reach out to others who are struggling with those same issues. And then just feeling God's love. As I mentioned, I grew up in a very legalistic and judgmental background, and being loved by my husband for who I am and how I am, and unconditionally, and just feeling special and chosen and loved has given me a better picture of God as a as a father, and in that relationship, what that means, and how he views me.
Oh, that's just so wonderful. I completely agree. Sometimes even the love of your own father, if it was kind of missing in your youth, your husband can really heal a lot of that hurt and that pain. Oh, that's just so good. Yeah. And it's interesting how the sexual relationship can provide a bridge between you and your husband, that you're meeting his needs in a very serious way, and then he also has that kind of freed up affection that he now wants to just pour all over you in the ways that you need. And it's it's also individual for specific marriages. Sometimes it's the higher drive wife, or vice versa, or whatever. But I found definitely in my experience that when I'm able to really enjoy the sexual experience, our connection in the other areas that are most important to my heart are so much better. Our conversations are so much deeper and more fulfilling for me. And he's so much more engaged because, he is much more fulfilled in his affection. So yes, wonderful. Wonderful. Now, we've talked about a couple books, a couple resources, but is there a specific book or a program that you would recommend for the listeners?
It would be a website, actually, which is the Marriage Bed.
Yep.
And tons of articles, resources, forums, questions, answers. So I would totally recommend themarriagebed.com.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really trying to get them on for an interview, so hopefully this will encourage.
Yeah. They're fantastic. And then, you can really Google Christian intimacy and marriage, and there actually are just so many books. I mean, there's sheet music, there's really too many for me for them to pop into my head right now.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and I'm definitely going to have all this linked up in the show notes so that just go to delightyourmarriage.com and click on this episode, and you'll be able to see each of these resources listed. So I definitely appreciate that. And the Marriage Bread is a great resource for sure. Now, also specifically on your website, I know you mentioned, what is the one product that you said that you often advise to wives if they're just wanting to kind of dip their toe into adult toys and products? What would you suggest?
It's really a category, and it's eggs and bullets, which just refers to something that's shaped like an egg but much smaller. And it's just placed on the woman's clitoris during intercourse. It's very unobtrusive. It's almost like it's not there. It provides a pleasurable vibration to both the woman and the husband. And it's enough to just take you, if you're having trouble having an orgasm, to take you over the edge. And but the other thing is we don't carry anything that actually looks like body parts.
Oh,
So
good.
they're
Yeah.
just cylinders or whatever. So there's nothing you're just going to pull out and be like, oh my gosh, but
Yeah.
but yeah, our number one top seller is something called the Inner Desire egg, which is just a simple pink egg toy. But anything under that category of eggs and bullets makes a great first purchase.
Oh, I'm
And it's
just so
also our
glad.
most inexpensive items as well.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So you can just kind of see what it's like and
Exactly.
not have to sell your arm to try to invest in your
Yeah,
marriage or something.
exactly.
Just something to kind of see how it's going to work. I love that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for the advice. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, I want to ask you if you could sit yourself down for the first year of your marriage. If you could go back to year one of your marriage and you could sit yourself down, what would be one piece of advice that you would give to you?
To a year ago?
For the first year of your marriage, like if you could kind of go back to year one, what would your advice be to yourself?
I read that question earlier as a year
Yeah.
ago. So my husband and I were talking about the move thing. So now I have to think
Oh,
again as
oh, well, you know what? If you'd like to give both, that's okay.
I know. No, I'm trying to think. Um, I just as the best thing I can give to my children, to the world, or to anything is to keep our marriage number one, to not get frustrated or resentful, but to just to keep an open heart and to get to know each other better, to grow, to get help, and that it's going to result in just a beautiful friendship and a beautiful relationship. And, together we're going to be able to make an impact on our family and the people around us through the time that we put into the relationship with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that's been a wonderful theme throughout. And you can tell I just your kids saying that I hate you, but mom and dad love each other. I mean, you're so right. I mean, that's such a safety point for kids that it's just so good that no matter what, mom and dad are going to stick it out. Just so beautiful. But I am interested. You piqued my interest. What did you prepare for the year ago?
Oh, well, when I had asked my husband this morning, that's when he brought up about when we had moved. And he
Okay.
had said, this time we moved and I wasn't stressed hardly at all. You didn't push me. You didn't, anything you really learned from the last time that we moved that much more difficult for him, just
Mm.
changes and things like that. So he was like, he so much appreciated learning to respect what his limits were and be willing to reside within those. So
Mm. Wow.
that was
I
yeah.
love that. Well, it's funny. Literally next week, I am moving, so I will take that
Yeah.
advice.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it can be
Yeah,
very stressful.
you're so
Yeah.
right. It's true. But yeah, to not push, to stay calm. And I also love that, the insight. Tell me again how many years you've been married with your husband?
16.
16. So after 16 years, you're still considering how you're learning, how you're growing, how dynamics are shifting in your marriage, and it's an ongoing process. And you exhibit that so well, Lael.
Yeah, my husband and I've had a date almost every week from the day we were married.
Wow.
Just spending time together, and we try to keep a marriage book on CD in the van and listen to, whatever it may be, and read different books together and things. So.
Oh, wow. That's so great. Oh, I just love it. I know that you've given wives so much inspiration and excitement about their marriage and marriage bed. Where can our audience find you and connect with you online?
It is just covenantspice.com, and you can just remember it by adding spice to your marriage covenant. So Covenant Spice. And if your readers use the code DELIGHT, DELIGHT, they'll have free shipping on their orders this week.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for that. That's a great gift. I didn't even know. I appreciate that. Cool. So yeah, please check that out, covenantspice.com. And like I said, it'll all be linked in the show notes with the code that she mentioned, DELIGHT. So you can go there. This week. Perfect. Well, it's been awesome, Lael. Thank you so much for sharing your heart and being so open with our audience. I just so appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we'll talk to you soon, Lael.
Okay. Thank you.
Just so great. Such great advice and wisdom. And it's so nice when I heard a woman preacher say this the other day, that maybe you have been kind of put under quote unquote bondage by certain things that you've learned or heard over the years, and things that you thought were true or things that you thought were even biblical that really just didn't seem to be now that you've seen it as an adult or something. And I like this woman's analogy of kind of just taking off that bondage, just layer by layer, unveiling what's really going on. So I hope that, it's a kind of a spicier, maybe more taboo topic, but I hope that things have been revealed to you a little bit more clearly and a little bit more of what God's heart is for your intimacy. And it can be a lot of fun and just goofy and silly and, all the things that God wants and made it to be. So yeah, have fun tonight. Just go for it and do something silly. Why not? I'm excited. I'll talk to you again on Tuesday. God bless you. I love you. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening. Stop by delightyourmarriage.com to check out all the show notes, as well as many more resources and articles. Until next time, live with love, wisdom, and passion.